So, today we are continuing with the chapter Disease and Immunity, and we will be starting with the topic of antibiotics. So, first of all, we come across a definition of drugs. And according to the syllabus, a drug is any substance taken into the body that modifies or affects the chemical reactions in the body of the body, taking place in the body. Let me write that down. Taken into the body that affects or modifies the chemical reactions in the body. Right, and by this definition, many of the things that we take are drugs. Right, for example, a simple painkiller for numbing the pain that we're feeling because of any injury or simply because we're having a headache. Right, that is a drug. Obviously something that we are taking to subside a fever, right? So a pyretic, but actually an antipyretic, right? Along with that, the stuff that we drink, so tea, coffee, energy drinks, they have caffeine, and that also classifies as a drug. Then we just talked about smoking, so tobacco and nicotine. They are,
Caffeine?
hmm?
Caffeine is also included.
Yes, by definition, it is a drug, right? In fact,
Like
not
how,
tobacco. Yes, go ahead.
like how is it a drug?
Because caffeine is a stimulant, so it affects our neurotransmitters and helps us feel more alert and awake and responsive.
Okay.
Right now, the amount of caffeine in tea is considerably less as compared to coffee and perhaps energy drinks, but it is there. So you've got caffeine, you've got nicotine in tobacco, and even alcohol, as you studied. These are all classified as drugs. Then uh, you've got other types such as recreational drugs, which in general are illegal. Right, so these are the types of drugs people use. For example, right, you may have heard of ice or marijuana, if I got the spelling right. Right, so these are illegal drugs because they cause a person to perhaps hallucinate or sleep or feel better, but then it has adverse effects and they can cause addiction very quickly. Right, tolerance and addiction is something that can happen to pretty much anything in the body, but these guys are pretty bad. Right, and then you've got the antibiotics. So these guys by definition are also drugs. So when you read a book of science or a book of biology or a book of medicine, right, or you hear somewhere that the drugstore, we call it the medical store or the pharmacy, but it's also sometimes in some uh, places called the drugstore. And that's because medicine in general, by definition, are drugs as well. right? And that's why we need to differentiate them
I
from other kinds of drugs. Yes.
what is ice?
Hmm?
What is ice?
Ice is a type of recreational drug, just like marijuana. So if you want the specifics, let me just quickly pull it up. Uh, pull it up. Let's. Uh,
It's not the ice we eat, no? Like
no, no,
the
no, no,
water.
no, 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 no. Right. So ice is also known as crystal meth. So the same drug tends to have different names, like marijuana is also called pot. Ice is crystal meth. Then some of the ones that we are like we have like hashish or chars or bhang, right? Those are also drugs. And ice also has many other names, right? Crystal or crystal meth or glass, or they're just like and it makes you feel happy, confident, energetic. So it's a stimulant, right? But then, you know, over time with use, it can make you feel exhausted and have a reduced appetite and to hallucinate and feel irritable and confused, right? And if you take too much of it, then obviously it can have more severe effects and can obviously lead to very detrimental effects and possibly death as well, right? So, on a side note, now, as I was mentioning, antibiotics, as the name suggests, right, are medicines, are drugs, are chemicals that are used. So these guys, chemicals used to kill bacteria, right? Only bacteria. So they're only effective against bacteria. And for us, obviously, we take them during an infection. Now, when I say during an infection, it's necessary that the infection needs to be bacterial. Why? Because they will have no effect whatsoever for a viral infection, right? Or even if it's fungal, right? So viral infections, mostly either you get vaccinations or you wait for your immune system to work it out. There are certain antiviral medication, antiviral drugs available now, right? As far as fungal infections are concerned, you have antifungal medication for that, right? And so there are different medications for different types of ailments, for the different types of pathogens that are causing those conditions. And so care must be taken what medicine you're taking for which condition, right? Because antibiotics are the most common and they're within the reach of people, they take it for anything, right? You get the common cold, you start taking antibiotics. You get a cough, antibiotics. Fever, antibiotics. And that obviously causes problems. Not only, well, if it's not bacterial and if it's not the right kind of antibiotic, right? So antibiotics are also of different types. If you haven't taken the right type, it still won't have an effect. Firstly, secondly, right? If it's a fungal or a viral infection, again, no effect. And then when there's no effect, what happens is bacteria, if you're taking the wrong medicine or you're taking it too often, or you're taking a low dose, right? Bacteria develop resistance. How? One way is that the bacteria that survive the antibiotic dose, right? They mutate and replicate, right? And now you have antibiotic resistant pathogens. And so when you take the same antibiotic again, for these guys that have, you know, that survived, that replicated, let me remove the mutated part for a moment, right? Might cause confusion. So these guys survived, and so that means that, right, the antibiotic had no effect on them, and so now they're antibiotic resistant. And so when you take the same medicine again later, it's not going to have an effect. Why? Because it didn't have the effect the first time and they survived, and now they're coming back stronger.
So like they became the drug for bacteria, like as we take alcohol and that becomes a drug for us.
It's not going to, I mean, again, generally, yes, right? But an alcohol cannot be called an antibiotic because it's not affecting, like, it's not going to help you with any of your uh, disease diseases caused by bacteria. It is going to affect the body. It's going to adversely affect the body in other ways that we have discussed, right? So just by saying drug, we need to be specific. Like, what drug are you talking about? Alcohol, by definition, is a drug, right? It can become a drug of abuse, right? So recreational drugs and drugs of abuse. They're called drugs of abuse because you start taking them, either they're stimulants or depressants. They either make you feel better or they make you feel dulled down, and depending on the condition, both are, good as compared to where you started off from. And then, as you discussed yesterday, when the effects wear off, you start feeling, less active, or more stressed. And so you, right, they're called drugs of abuse because you develop addiction very quickly, and the addiction is basically due to the body developing tolerance. So you need more and more of these guys, and right, more frequently. So you need the time period in which you're taking them and the amount in which you're taking them increases quickly, right? And they have very adverse effects, adverse health effects, and can obviously be lethal, right? Caffeine, not, I mean, like, you have to really overdose to have like a very detrimental effect, right? Antibiotics, people do take, medicine for like painkillers, for headaches, or antibiotics. Maybe people can do anything, right? And again, the point is, even if the body develops resistance because you're taking it too frequently, it develops tolerance, sorry, not resistance, and you need higher doses, you're still taking a chemical, and it's going to have some effects on the body. And that's why even antibiotics or any medication, any, right, like medical drug that you take, you take that paper that comes along with it. It's called the medical literature, right? And you read that, and they will be mentioning side effects. It used to be called that earlier. Now it's called contraindications, right? And you just
But
read the, right, and you just read that paper and the contraindications. And contraindications, basically the side effects or the adverse effects of the medicine. So it will have the effect that you want, but it's also going to have other effects on the body.
but to like infants and toddlers, we give them medicines often.
We
Like
should
don't the
not give
body
them, we should not give them medicine often. We should only give them medicine if the condition is severe, right? And we know that it's an infection. Otherwise, you need to sort of manage. For example, if they've got uh, influenza, right? Now, one sign of a bacterial infection is fever, high fever, and constant fever, right? And if it's lasting for, like, it's been 3 days and they're constantly having fever, right? Not just as soon as they get a fever, because you can get a fever with a viral infection as well. So if you refer to your doctor and the doctor is reasonable, they will not immediately, and I have experience with this as well, right? So the doctor will not immediately recommend you give medication to children or yourself. They'll ask you to wait for 3 days and notice what's going on, right? And most likely on the fourth day or so, the condition will be comparatively better, not like 100% okay, but comparatively better, right? So the fever might not come as often, or it might not go as high, or the coughing would, and they would tell you ways of managing it, right? So taking those mint and what's that chemical? It's slipping my mind. Methanol, not methanol. Sorry, not methanol. Uh, I'm sorry, it's slipping my mind, but right, those inhalers that declog your sinuses, and to gargle with salt water or to nebulize with norsaline, right, or maybe some other supportive measure. And so not immediately move to antibiotics or antifungals or something like that.
Like, then why did we give them like vaccination? Have you succeeded?
Vaccination is something different,
Okay.
right? So we'll come to that. So, right, some of the issues is taking antibiotics too often, taking low doses. So the dose that you're taking, right, for example, you need something that's 500 milligrams and you're taking something that's only 200 milligrams. So it's not enough to kill the bacteria, right? And so you're going to have a problem later on. Or not completing the dosage period, right? So you were supposed to take it for 5 days. Now, what happens as soon as you start taking it? Obviously, because it's an antibiotic, right? You take the medicine and it will kill the bacteria. Obviously, because that's what it do. It is a poison for the bacteria. When the bacteria die, the symptoms, so whatever you are feeling, will subside, right? They will lessen. They will become less. And maybe by day 3, I feel perfectly okay. I'm like, okay, fine, right? So this is fine. So I don't need to take the rest of the 2 days. And that's not true. You need to complete your 5 days so that by then, right, you've taken care of, let's say, 99% or 100% of the pathogen. Because if you don't, right, the pathogen has weakened, it's become less, that you are feeling better and it's not causing any severe symptoms that you were feeling earlier, but some might still be around, right? And if you stop, then the ones that survive will replicate, they will develop antibiotic resistance, and then they will, right, come back, and they will come back with a vengeance. Also, what can happen naturally is when bacteria, right, they replicate, they can mutate, and then they can naturally develop antibiotic resistance. So that's also a problem. Right? And when we have antibiotic resistance bacteria, right, the more resistant it's getting, right, the harder it becomes to deal with it, and you need newer drugs, again, medical drugs, and you might end up with something called a super pathogen or a super bug, right, which is so bad that no medicine is working on it, right, and then you have a problem. An example of that is MRSA, which is very common in hospitals, and that's why you shouldn't go to hospitals unless you need to, and you shouldn't take children to hospitals because their immune system is not as developed as an adult, right? So MRSA stands for uh, methicillin resistance staphylococcus aureus, right? If I'm not mistaking that. Yeah, methicillin, sorry, not methylene, but methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus, right? And it's a problem to deal with. So you don't need to know the full name of this guy, but now another, like what we haven't talked about, so let's just quickly go over that, right? Is how antibiotics affect bacteria, right? So an ideal antibiotic will have the features that it will cure the disease, right? So it will destroy the pathogen, a chemical that kills, or for some reason they like using the word destroy, destroys pathogen, right? Without harming the host tissue. So it doesn't affect the cells inside the host, which is us, or animals, if we are using that for animals, or plants even, right? So it only affects the pathogen. There used to be a drug which was the first antibiotic ever, penicillin, right? And it was known as the miracle drug and everything. It was super ideal, but it's pretty much become ineffective now because most, uh, you know, pathogens have evolved beyond it. So, right, doesn't really work. Penicillin, sorry.
So like penicillin needs to work for each and every like bacterial
It was,
infection. Bacteria.
I mean, right, antibiotics that work on a very large number of different types of bacteria are called broad spectrum.
So like one antibiotic can be used for different like bacterial
It
infections.
could, it could if it is broad spectrum, right? Broad
Okay.
spectrum meaning that it works as like broad and spectrum, so right, works on many different types.
So is it written on the like on the bottle? Okay.
If not on the bottle itself, then it should be in the literature. So if you take out that paper and read it,
Mhm.
right, it will mention that it's a broad spectrum, and then it will also mention what kinds of bacteria. So it's not all, but works on many different types
Okay.
of bacteria.
Like we have to first identify the bacteria.
Well, yes, hopefully a doctor does that, or if you are self-medicating, then you are doing that with proper understanding, right? And not just, doing it randomly. So I want to add to that is self-medication, right? So people have the slightest cough and they go and take any medicine, any strong medicine, it's not going to work, and the bacteria are going to, cause problems later on. So self-medication is an issue. For many things, if you just wait it out and you just manage the symptoms, given a few days, 3 5 days, maybe a week, the condition will get better on its own because your immune system will do its job, right? Now what antibiotics do is that they either target, for example, the cell wall of bacteria, or they target the replication, right, of the bacterial cells, uh, or they interfere with protein synthesis. So they target the cell wall, they target replication, so you can't get, the bacteria can't get more of itself, right? Targets protein synthesis, so obviously it's a living organism, right? There's synthesis, and if it's not happening, then it won't be able to survive. And so what happens is either it stops the growth at least, or just kills it off. For example, right, it may make tiny holes in the cell wall which will affect the osmotic balance osmotic of the cell, because bacteria are single celled, right, and that will cause the bacterial cell to burst, right. Now, why should they be safe for humans, for example? Because humans do not have those features which the antibiotic is targeting, right? So they don't have cell walls, right? The replication is different, their DNA is different, right? Their protein synthesis is different, right? And so the antibiotic is not going to cause harm to us, hopefully, right? But this is only on paper. Practically, antibiotics have side effects and sometimes severe side effects. So we need to keep those in mind as well, right? On paper, they're saying, oh, simple, maybe a bit of irritation, maybe a bit of allergy. It's not just a bit, right? It gets more. But anyway, as far as the syllabus is concerned. Okay. Any questions?
No.
Okay. So from here, we move on to.
But like, if the bacteria becomes like a like a tolerance for the antibiotic, then it won't work now.
Okay. Could you repeat that slowly, please?
Like, if the bacteria builds a tolerance for the antibiotic, then it won't work.
Yes. So if the bacteria develops a resistance, then it won't work. I believe, right? There are now fourth generation antibiotics in the market.
So, like, how can we stop the bacteria from building up that resistance?
By not by not doing any of this. So don't self-medicate, don't take antibiotics too often, don't take antibiotics for non-bacterial infections. So just pop up, preventive. If you got a viral and you're taking antibiotic just to prevent, no, don't do that, right? Because you don't have a bacterial infection, and so you're just causing problems. Don't take too low a dose. If you are taking antibiotics, complete the dosage period, right? And yes, do right. So if you follow these, you're going to reduce the chances of antibiotic resistance. It will still happen over time, but not as quickly as it is happening because of our misuse. Okay,
Yes.
so we're going to talk about the immune system now. And the immune system consists of the white blood cells. So, right, basically, there are two major types. They are the lymphocytes and the phagocytes. Right, the lymphocytes produce a protein called antibodies. Right, it's a protein. And what these do, these antibodies, they recognize particles, which could be proteins, which could be carbohydrates, which could be fats, whatever. And these are called antigens on the surface of cells. Right, so your own cells, you can have self antigens, which are the antigens on the surface of your own body cells, and you can have foreign antigens, which is what it will recognize. Okay, fine, so you're not from the body, right? And if that's the case, the antibodies will be released, right? These will be activated, and the antibodies will be released, and they will bind to the antigens, right? And that will mark whatever cell is carrying. It will mark it and highlight it, right? So the phagocytes, right, and the lymphocytes can also come and attach to the marked cells to further highlight them, to highlight for phagocytes. What the phagocytes do is, when a cell like this is highlighted, they eat it up, right? So
That's present.
they engulf marked cells, or foreign bodies, or it could be dead or diseased body cells as well, right? So how do you how does the body remove dead cells or diseased cells, the ones that have been infected by a bacteria or by a virus? So self antigens, foreign antigens, right? Or again, infected or dead cells, and right, it engulfs it, so it sort of eats it, right? So if this is a pathogen, a phagocyte, right, and this is a body cell or a bacterial or whatever, and so what it does is it takes it up inside. So not the nucleus, this is the pathogen over here, right? This is the phagocyte, and this is the cell, other cell, right, whatever it may be, and then it digests it. And obviously when it's digesting it, it's using enzymes, and it breaks it apart. Basically, if it wasn't already dead, it will kill it, and thereby, right, stopping the pathogen, for example, or getting rid of the disease cell, or recycling the material. So getting rid of dead cell, well, actually, disease cell, and right, stopping pathogen, and recycling dead cell, right? So some of the materials from the dead cell are recycled, right? Now, the good thing about antibodies is that they are specific, right? So the antibody for one pathogen or one antigen will not work on a different antigen, right? And so there are specific antibodies for every type of antigen that the body encounters, right? Uh, so that is why whenever you get a new type of infection, the immune system takes some time because it is developing the appropriate antibodies for this new antigen that the pathogen has on it. Also, what happens is after,
Sir, can you give an example?
well, for example, the influenza, right? The influenza virus, right, can only, like, viral infections can only be combated by the immune system, right? Again, there are some antivirals out now, but in general, it's the immune system that deals with it. The problem with influenza, which is a viral infection, is that it keeps mutating. So every time you get the cold, the coughing, and the runny nose and everything, the virus is slightly changed, and so every time, right, the immune system has to make new antibodies for the new type of virus, right? Otherwise, uh, if it was always the same virus, then what happens is, after, as I was saying, after a first infection. Oh, and also, right, if you have developed antibodies against an influenza virus, right, it's not going to work on, for example, something called the rhinovirus. So that's a different kind of virus. This also causes conditions similar to influenza, right? But you need different so if you get infected by the rhinovirus, right, the immune system will have to develop antibodies that are specific to the rhinovirus. If you already have antibodies for the influenza, they're not going to work on the rhinovirus or any other virus, right? Or if it's bacterial, then if you were, for example, infected by one type of bacteria, maybe a Vibrio or a Streptococcus, and next time you get infected by staphylococcus, not streptococcus, but staphylococcus, you need new antibodies for that particular kind of pathogen. Now, as I was saying, after a first infection, what happens is that the lymphocytes, some of the lymphocytes, they become what are called memory cells. And as the name suggests, they remember the antigens. So if you get the same infection the second time, the same pathogen coming into the body for a second time, you get a much quicker response. Why? Because this time, let's say the immune system has experience, and so some of the cells are ready to make antibodies, right? Ready to produce antibodies. You get a much quicker response. And sometimes you don't get infections at all, right? So an example is chickenpox, right? Children get it when they're young, and right, obviously, as developed as the immune system may be, they have not faced. So this is a viral disease, right? And you normally get it when you're young, and you normally only get it once in a lifetime. Why? Because, right, when you get infected, the body develops antibodies against the virus, and the virus hasn't mutated, so it also makes memory cells. I mean, it will make memory cells, but the memory cells will only be useful if it's the same pathogen. If it's mutated or if it's a different pathogen, the memory cells will not be able to do anything, right? So it will have memory cells against this virus. If that virus ever comes back, the immune system will be able to get rid of it, perhaps as quick, so quick that the pathogen doesn't even get time to cause the infection. So that's a good thing. That brings us very quickly to the topic of vaccination.
That depends on our body's needs.
Huh?
Like that depends on our body's needs. Like if our body gonna create like antibodies or not.
I'm sorry, your voice was breaking up.
Like that depends on our body. If like our body wanna create like antibodies or not.
If everything is working normally, your immune system, your white blood cells, your lymphocytes will make antibodies, right? In the case like we talked about cholera or some other diseases, the problem is not that the body cannot make antibodies, it's just that the pathogen is so fast that the immune response is not fast enough to deal with the pathogen, right? The pathogen is much more effective and works very quickly and causes harm to the body so much that if you wait for the immune system to take if produce the antibodies and do what it's supposed to do, by that time you're going to be in very poor condition or possibly dead, right? So it's not that if everything's fine and so the body will do what it's supposed to do. Now what vaccination does is for usually for very serious diseases, what they do is either they take dead pathogens, right, or parts of pathogens, And what they do is that they introduce it into the body in a way it will not cause the infection, right? But will activate the immune system. And so what that will do is that will cause the production of antibodies and memory cells. So if ever in the future, right, you get a real infection, right, the body will respond much quicker. Okay. Now vaccinate,
Yes.
right? What vaccination does is basically it confers, so it gives you what is called immunity. Right? Immunity means that your immune system has been activated for a particular pathogen. Right? So immunity is based on pathogen to pathogen, right? Not overall that, oh, overall I have immunity. You don't have overall immunity, right? It's just that for this particular pathogen, you now have immunity. It can be of two types. It can be active immunity, which basically means, right, you get it by getting the actual disease, right? So like children develop immunity for chickenpox and it stays for life, hopefully. Or it could be passive immunity. So in this case, right, passive immunity uh, could be, I mean, it is the antibodies from a mother being transferred to a child through milk, right? Through the mother's milk. Now the thing about passive immunity is it's called passive because the only the antibodies are being transferred, right? So it only lasts for a short time because the child's own immune system is not activated, right? Active immunity is also of two types. Let me just check if they mention that in the text. I don't want to go beyond the scope of the syllabus. So do they mention active and passive immunity? Yeah, no, they don't mention active and passive immunity, so I will skip that. Oh, they do. Right? So, sorry, not act. I did mention active passive. Sorry, natural and artificial. So they don't mention natural and artificial. So yes, uh, passive immunity. Are they mentioning? Right. Another example of passive immunity is taking antibody serum for a particular disease. Right. So you don't have a medicine for a condition, and what you do is you take antibody serums from a healthy person and give it to a person who has a condition. And so what the antibodies, they will deal with the condition, but because it's not the person it's not activated by the person who is infected his own immune system, they don't last very long. Okay. Anything that I'm missing? uh, Yeah, so there's like, minor details and, explanation in the book that you can obviously read and get that. And I believe we done? Yes, we are.
But like, why do we,
Huh?
like, why do we vaccinate infants?
Why do we vaccinate?
Infants.
Why do we vaccinate infants, right? Because there are certain pathogens and diseases that are very dangerous, right? And so we've learned that over time, and we've developed, and infants are the most susceptible. They are the weakest because their immune system is so. A baby from birth up till 6 months, their immune system is not working, right? And so if the mother is hopefully, you know, giving the baby its, milk, breastfeeding, and so in the mother's milk, antibodies from the mother are being transferred to the baby, and so that passive immunity is helping keep the baby healthy. After 6 months, the baby's immune system starts working, so that time period is very critical, and even after that as well. So we vaccinate for some diseases that the child may be very vulnerable to, so that it has immunity if in case it ever comes across that disease at a young age.
Okay. So like they don't have white cells,
They do,
white blood
they
cells.
do, but they're not like as in number, and they're not as active and mature.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Anything else?
No.
Right, so we're done with chapter 12, and so the next time we will begin with chapter 13, that is excretion.
Okay.
All right.
Yes.
All right, see you next time, inshallah.
Inshallah. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.